that for a few hundred years, we have had a really good, before satellites, we've known what the world looks like. Like, that just blows my mind. People that are much smarter than I am have been able to create a map of the world, and I still don't know my way around town. And they were able to say, yeah, like a continent. Think about a continent. They were able to figure out what a continent looks like without looking from above. And so like cartography has just been something like the history of cartography, the history of exploration. That's just been like branded on me for like a month. So then I was like, I got to talk about that this morning. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history because I like history and I like facts. So America, the Americas, which is North America, Central America, South America, it's named after Amerigo Vespucci. Anyways, he named it. So Christopher Columbus, don't get me started on Christopher Columbus. I don't really like Christopher Columbus. He got here. But anyways, a few years later, this guy came over, and I love the fact that like we don't live in North Columbus, we live in North America, named after this guy. But anyways, he named North, Central, and South America based off of his name. A lot of people that make maps and explorers, they're all a little narcissistic, and they name things after themselves. This guy also named Venezuela, and essentially he went to Venezuela. He saw that all the houses were on stilts, and he was like, oh, this is like Little Venice. And so he named it Venezuela, which is Spanish for Little Venice. Like, oh, cute Little Venice. Even though it's much bigger than Venice, so that didn't make any sense. But and there's all different types of world maps. Like when you think of a world map, you're like, okay, there's one world map. No, there's like 50 different world maps because you're taking a round object and you're putting it on a flat surface, so there's no way to make it completely accurate. So the Mercator projection is probably the one that you know the most. I think Chad may have one. That's a Mercator projection. That's actually what's on my arm as well. It has its flaws, and I'm going to go up there because this is just cool. How often do you have a screen this big? What's cool about this is it's meant for navigation. So it's accurate in one way and inaccurate in another way because it's a round object. You can't have both. So what it's accurate in is this guy came up, Mercator. His last name was Mercator, so he named it the Mercator projection. He came up with latitude and longitude. He was able to figure that out early on. So it's accurate in the sense of, you see these lines? So you can look at any point in the map, and you could go straight across, and it corresponds with wherever. So like if you went to that part of Africa and you followed the line, you would hit that part of South America. So it's the most accurate thing that we have for navigation. But what's wrong with it is sizing. So Greenland, the big white thing up at the top, Greenland is, well, Africa is 13 times the size of Greenland. And you can look on the map, they look almost the exact same size because it's round. So it's right directionally, but all the sizing, everything up top is grossly exaggerated, and everything on the bottom is grossly exaggerated. Antarctica's not that big. So anyways, that's the Mercator projection. They have other projections that actually show like the correct sizing in the maps, but you can't figure out where they sit with each other without an actual globe. Actually, you want to hear something else that's really interesting? I'm telling you, I'm all about maps right now. Have any of you ever seen one of those globes like in a classroom that have like mountains on it? And you can feel it, right? That's grossly exaggerated too. If you were to shrink the earth down to this size, it would be smoother than a cue ball. 8,000 miles in diameter and only 11 miles deep. So when you were to zoom that out, it would be very smooth. I think that's really cool. Here's another one. We're finding out so much about the earth, like just more and more. We're finding out more and more facts. It's crazy, the things that we can find out. Like just last week, they released new satellite imagery of Antarctica because up until last week, we had better imagery of Mars than we did Antarctica. We didn't have the proper satellites over the continent. So like if you look it up, it'll probably trend. If you Google Antarctica, you'll see them. But like we have now this detailed imagery of what in the world Antarctica looks like, because only 7,000 people go to Antarctica a year, and they're all scientists. And so, and it's uninhabitable unless you're a scientist that's going there for work and you're eating granola bars. So we're just now finding out what in the world Antarctica even looks like. Here's one more fact. I'm wasting all this time with this stuff. We haven't got anything spiritual. This one blew my mind. Tides, evening tides, morning tides, don't move. Now, waves move. Waves come in and out, right? But, at the end of the day, like the tide comes in with the moon and all that, right? And then it recedes in the morning. Doesn't recede, doesn't come in. So the earth is round, and the tide is like this, and we are circling inside the tide. Like the ocean's like this, it bevels out like an oval, and the earth is circling, and the ocean's not. And so when you say like the tide's coming, tide's not really coming. Like we're actually just circling into the water. That blew my mind. So like you've just got this oval type thing, and like an egg. That's the best way to kind of put it. Like an egg on its side is what the ocean's like, and we're just kind of rolling into it. I mean, so it's just like, it kind of ruins like the poetry of it, like the tide's coming. Same thing with like sunset. There's no sunset. We're actually just rotating around it, but there's not a beautiful way to put that. Anyways, I say all that to say we know all these facts because people set out to discover. Someone's got to set out and discover. Someone has to explore. Someone has to find. There's still regions of this world that no one has been to yet, and me being just someone who loves to explore and likes adventure, like I want to go there, but I also don't want to die. The guy who like discovered the Amazon, there's a movie called The Lost City of Z. It came out like last year. It's all about this guy who discovered the Amazon. I can't talk about this too much because I'm going to have everybody back out of the trip in 2 weeks. But this guy, like 100 years ago, like he wanted to chart the Amazon. He did like 3 trips, but he became obsessed with it and like would go for years on a time. And finally, the last trip, he never came back. And they still haven't found him. Like found his body, he would be dead by now. But they haven't found his body, and you're like, how have they found him? Because 100 explorers have gone to find his body, and they haven't found it. And it's because the Amazon rainforest is the size of the 48 states, the continental 48. It's the largest rainforest in the world. Here we go. Here comes the facts. All right. We spend the whole time just talking about geography. Okay. Rapid fire facts about the Amazon. I just got to share these. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but we're going to the Amazon in 2 weeks, and I'm just so excited. Okay, so the Amazon is the world's largest rainforest. It's larger than the Congo and the Indonesia rainforest combined. 2.72 million square miles of the Amazon basin. It's large. It's just the same size as the 48, and covers 40% of South America. 450 to 500 indigenous tribes are in the rainforest, and 50 of them have never been touched from the outside world. They're just living, 500 years ago in life, and have no clue that we can fly and metal things and communicate and all that. This terrain, people refer to the Amazon as the lungs of the earth, because all the vegetation's there. It takes all the carbon dioxide out of the air, releases oxygen, and provides 20% of the world's oxygen from the Amazon. It delivers 55 million gallons of water into the Atlantic Ocean every second. If Amazonia were to be a country, it would be the 9th largest in the world. It contains 3,000 fruits, and only 200 are consumed by the Western world. And it's so dark, it's so lush, that the rainforest floor only contains 1% light because of the canopy. 85% of the world's plants and animals are in the rainforest. In the last 10 years, a new plant or animal has been discovered every 3 minutes. This is a massive, mysterious place. I just had 4 people drop out of our trip. Okay. So I said all that to say, here's one more thing. This is called a sextant. Has anyone ever seen one of these things before? I believe it was, I can't remember how many years ago that it was made. This is a replica. This is really cool. I bought this for my desk, and my wife thinks I'm a nerd. I was like, I got this thing coming, and I'm going to, she's like, okay, cool. This thing right here, you can find out wherever you are in the world with this. If you know what time it is, you can use a sundial or a watch. If you know what time it is, you can figure out what quadrant you are in the world. And they use it for navigation, they use it for map making, they use it for all these things. And essentially what you do is you look into it, and you start adjusting. You find the sun, or you find the stars, because for hundreds of years we've been able to navigate from the stars, depending on what side of the equator you are on. You do that, and then you measure where the sun is to like where the ocean line is, whatever they call the horizon, or you can measure 2 mountains or whatever. And then you can go, okay, well, it's 4 o'clock. So if this is here, it's essentially a protractor. You can measure that out, and then you can look at this graph and go, oh, okay, I'm this degree by this degree. That's crazy to me. It's also, I think about it too, like, if you use the sun and the stars, you can figure out where you are in the world. Also, the same thing is, if you will just start measuring where you are in life compared to where God is. Like, if you will just, okay, yeah, I'm in this storm. I don't know what's going on. I'm so confused in life, all that. If you will just get your little protractor here and look at God, set the course based on God first, not situation, not by waves, not by storm, but you'll sit there and you'll look at God, and then you compare that to your situation. You can figure out a whole lot about your life. But so many times we're just like, I see storm, I see this, I see this. We just need to set our eyes on Him, and then all of a sudden, everything else becomes clear, and we know exactly where we are. So Psalms 2:8 says, ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possession. Now, this is obviously talking about Christ coming, obviously, hundreds of years later. But what we find out later in the scriptures, that as Christ leaves, He instills Christ within us, and we become the body of Christ, and we have the role of Christ on this earth. So we can use that scripture as our role here on earth. So the nations are our inheritance. Now, this is not like put a crown on, walk around. This is not for our own glory. This is to glorify God, but this is a way for us to have confidence in what we are doing. That we're not just like going rogue and trying to walk around this thing that's not ours. But the scripture says that it's our inheritance. It's not a reward. It's not something you earn. Inheritance is a great thing it's just yours. You're born into this. And so if we had that mindset when we go into these nations where so many people are like, oh, I'm so afraid to go there. What are you talking about? This is your house. This is your dad's house. You know what I mean? Like, I don't go to my parents' house in Ohio and like just kind of tiptoe around, and I open that fridge. I'm just walking around, like sit in the recliner. Like, this is my dad's house. That's how we should go into it, not with an arrogance, but with a confidence in who we are and what our assignment is. So when we go in, when Far-Flung goes to a country we've never been in before, and we don't necessarily have reign and territory and all that, we have to go into the mindset of like, it is our inheritance, and the nations were given to us. So we have that authority. So when we go to the Amazon rainforest, and we've never been there before, most of us have never been there, and all those things, and we're maybe, this seems daunting. It's like, no, like, we are called here. We're coming home. There are so many unreached people groups in the world. That scripture that says, His name will be known in every nation, and then the end will come. And one translation says, His name will be known in every people group, and then the end will come. And they say that there's still like over 5,000 people groups in the world that still have not known the name of Christ. So if you were to reverse that, like, everybody has to have the opportunity to hear Christ before He comes back. That means someone's got to go somewhere. Like, someone has to do something for that equation to work out. It's not just going to happen by accident. There's so many unreached people. And I think of Charlie. So last year, you guys probably met Charlie if you came, and we did the film about Thailand. It's out there. It's great. God put it on our heart to go to Thailand. This was back in like 2012 or 13. And I saw this vision that I was in a jungle with a machete. And I was cutting through the jungle with a machete. And there was no sign that said Thailand, but I knew it was Thailand. And so for several years, I would just continue to like look for missionaries that are in Thailand. We met some great ones, but they weren't the right ones. They were doing great work, but it just didn't click. We just kept asking people. And by the way, a little side note on that, some of the biggest blessings in my life have been closed doors. I mean, even before we started this ministry, we tried to work for other ministries, and it was really frustrating when nobody would take a chance on us. And I was just really discouraged. I was like, God, I thought you called me this. God, I thought I was on to something. I thought this is a great idea. Nobody believes in me. And now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, one of the biggest blessings of my life was a disappointment. And so sometimes it takes time to really look at it. But if you know that ahead of time and you're disappointed that things aren't working out, you can thank God that he closed some doors so that the right ones would open years later. So we patiently waited from 2012 or 13, and it wasn't until beginning of 2016 that at a Super Bowl party, someone's like, hey, I heard you're looking for missionaries in Thailand. I know my buddy has a dad in Thailand, and he does a ministry. So then I Skyped with him. And the only thing I had was like, okay, like I had a machete, and I was cutting through the jungle. And so I was asking him, and he had an orphanage, he had a coffee farm, and all this stuff. And so he didn't say anything about jungles. I was like, so do you like go in the villages or anything? He's like, there was 100 square mile radius of jungle with no roads, but there was 100 villages in it. And so there's a huge people group that nobody was in there. And he was like, I was the first one. I took my machete, and I just started cutting through, and I got there, and I was like, mm-hmm. And I was like, when did you move there? And he was like, we flew there December 31st, 1986. I was like, oh, so the day I was born, you flew there? Yeah. And then, you guys, if you've seen the film, you know the whole story about how he ended up being trained in missions in Guatemala from my father-in-law, like all this stuff we find out after we get there. But anyway, so when we get there, I love how God is just the greatest magician ever, and just sleight of hand, and he just brings things full circle, because at the end, we had some money to pour in to whatever needed. We had like $1,000. We didn't know what to do with it, and we had to make a decision partway on the trip. Do we go to the orphanage that they have, or do we go to where they started, back in that jungle? And we prayed and prayed. We're like, okay, we're going to go to that jungle. So we're like, what can we do there? Then I said, they would love to have an open field where they can have meetings and soccer, and they can all the villagers from 12 different villages can meet and have prayer meetings, but they need a tractor. It'd be like $1,000. So we're like, okay, yeah. So we use that $1,000 for that. But we get there, and the tractor didn't have a tire. So we're like, okay, so now what? Well, we get out to there. We're thinking we're just going to sit around and wait, and we get out there to the field, and all of a sudden, there's 50 villagers out there with machetes. They're just cutting. And so, like, literally just go back to where it all started, from machete. I actually paid one of the villagers. I said, I don't care what you charge me. I want that machete. So, like, we came back with the machete. So we started with the machete, and we came back with the machete. And it was just so crazy how God does that. But there are people groups in the world that 100 square mile radius, there's no way in. Someone's got to cut through. Like, someone had to start there. Someone had to go in there. There's no map of that jungle. Someone has to go in and map it out. That's what we are called to be. We are called to be map makers. We are called to go to places. Our pastor here, Pastor Kevin, he always talks about the difference between traveling by compass and traveling by map. And traveling by map is going somewhere someone's already been. Traveling by compass is just following a leading and following a direction. We need to go to places where there are no maps, and we need to be map makers. And we need to describe the terrain and all those. Jojo touched a little bit on this last night. There's power in truth. That's something that we're realizing as we're figuring out what ministry looks like for us. But there's power in declaring truth. There's just something about that, like truth in scriptures, truth about things that we know. Like when we declare that, it is the active ingredient. Like in chemistry, there's always like an active ingredient that just activates things. And declaring truth does that. So when we talk about like there's several scriptures like that. There's glory all over the earth, the glory of the earth, and it's always past tense. Like the glory is all here, and all there's tons of them. But then there's one that's talking about like present and future tense. And I always thought that the scripture was, like the earth will be filled with the glory as the water covers the seas. But it's actually not what it is. It says, as the water fills the seas, the earth will be filled with the awareness or the knowledge of the glory. Because the glory is already here. The earth is filled with the glory, but people are not aware of it. But when you declare truth, all of a sudden, like, it just starts changing everything. That takes the pressure off of me. Because I always just thought, like, we're going to this dark area of the world that God's not there, and I've got to create the glory. And God's not saying, what are you talking about? There's glory there. You just need to shine the flashlight on it. I'm going to give a little example. Okay, go ahead. Just black the lights out. All of them. There you go. And you can turn the, Chad, if you'll turn the screen black. I'm just going to black it out. There we go. Okay. Right? This is how, okay, right here, this is like Missions 101. This is what it feels like a lot. It doesn't feel like the conference. It just feels like I'm just sitting here. But our job is not to create anything. It's just to reveal it. It's not. We don't have to create glory. It's just, okay, I thought we were going to have a marker. Nick, if you'll come stand like right over here. And Janie, if you'll come stand like right over there. So our job is not to have to create the glory of God all over the earth and the dark places of the earth, because it's already present. So Janie's already there, but you can't really see her. Now, if you'll bring a light up on Janie a little bit. Oh, we got it wrong. Oh, it's coming. It's coming for her. It's coming for her. Oh, look, I didn't know they moved. Yeah. Janie's always been there. It's just not revealed. That's simply all we have to do is reveal it, shine the light on her. Now, Nick, there's a light coming for you. There he is. Just go into the light. Go ahead. There you go. Nick was always there. He just wasn't revealed. And that's what it is. When we go into nations of the earth where God's not reigning, all it is that we have to go there and just reveal truth and proclaim truth. And all of a sudden, like, the glory of God is shown, and he does the miraculous. We don't have to create glory. Thank you. You don't have to create glory. We don't have to, like, summon it. It's literally just saying, God, like, this is your earth. With that inheritance that we have, we can just proclaim, this is the Lord's earth. This is the Lord's nation. And proclaim healing, proclaim truth, and all those things. And it's simple as that. We're called to places that no one's been before. Maybe not like physically, like no one has ever been in this jungle, but sometimes yes. But Christianity and the knowledge of the glory, we're called to those places. Someone has to go there and say, this is truth. This is the way. This is the light. And so map makers don't create mountains. Map makers don't create rivers. They don't create valleys. That's a very daunting task, and it's impossible. They go into the jungles of the Amazon, and they go there, and they go, that is a mountain. That is truth. That is a mountain. That is a river. That is a valley. And then they start writing it down, and they take that map back, and they show everybody, this is truth. And now, all of a sudden, they know their way around. They didn't have to create anything. All they have to do is reveal what is already there that no one can see. Maps are created for navigating. We need to help people navigate through their lives through revealing truth. Just think about the time that we're living in. The scriptures say that, like, we don't just live in the time that we live in just by happenstance. Everything is designed. For hundreds of years, for thousands of years, humanity was divided into two sections. Australia, Africa, Europe, Asia, and then the Americas over here. Two different species, so to speak, that never had any communication with each other. For thousands of years, they lived in two separate worlds, and then Christopher Columbus came over and bridged humanity. I'll give him that much. He also did awful things to Native Americans. But he bridged humanity into one. But you're like, why are you bringing that up? You could have been born in the Bible. You could have been born in a time where it took, Oregon Trail. It took, however many years, a whole generation to get across the U.S. You think it's coincidence that we can travel to Australia? I could be there by tomorrow? Like, think about that. For thousands of years, this side of the world was just radio silent from the other side of the world. Had no clue they were even there. And now you're living in a time where in 24 hours you can be in any part of the world. And if we're designed and created to live in the time and the place that we live in, don't you think that there's probably some type of possibility that we have a calling to go outside of what was impossible for over 4,000 years? That we have the capability and technology to send out a message of hope to literally anywhere that has Wi-Fi? That we can, even like 15 years ago, the fact that I could Skype into Thailand right now and have him on the big screen and he could be in the jungle. They've got better, they have fiber optics in their orphanage in Thailand. We can have we have better signal to Thailand than we do in Cleveland. Because y'all don't have EPV. Sorry, I love EPV. But anyways, we can do amazing things right now. You think it's just, the evolution of humanity? No, you were designed. You could have been, think about this. Paul was chosen to be in the Bible, but you have a much greater potential and reach than Paul had. I think of Elijah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could never do the things that Elijah did. And I'm like, wait a second. Just based on the time that I live in, I can do a lot better things than Elijah did. I can reach people groups that Elijah could never reach. The people in the Bible, it was a map to how we should be, but God wanted them to be the map so that we can do greater things. Christ himself said, I have to go so that you can do greater things than me. Because the nations are in our inheritance. So we are called to these places in the earth or to support people going to these nations in the earth. And in some ways, I feel again, nerd, I like science fiction movies, right? Any movie that talks about time travel, I'm like, okay, I'm in, right? Oh my gosh, I could get into time travel. There's this guy named Neil deGrasse Tyson that I watch all his YouTube videos. Oh my gosh, and he talks about time. Okay, I think time travel is a possibility. Okay, what time is it? Oh gosh, real quick. There's a theory, and there's no way to prove it or disprove it, and it doesn't really change theology. So I'm like, this could be true, but there's a theory that there's time travel in the Bible because it says that the theory is that when Moses goes up on Mount Sinai and he sees the glory of God and the glory of God is revealed to him and he's just filled in the glory, that he time travels to the Mount of Transfiguration. So that he's not coming back from heaven, that it's actually happening right then. He sees everything that he sees in the New Testament, and then it goes back and he goes down and give the law. And the same thing with Elijah when he's raptured up, that he time travels to the New Testament. That's incredible to me. There's no way to disprove it or prove it, so I'm just going to say, yeah, I believe it. I think it's amazing. Just because I like time travel, I'm like, yes. But anyways, okay, in any time travel movie, what happens? They go back to fix something, right? And it changes the whole course and what was supposed to happen, right? That's the problem in every time travel movie. I'm going to go back and do something, and someone shows up somewhere where they're not supposed to be in history, and then all of a sudden, the timeline from then on out is changed. That's kind of what we do. And someone who likes time travel, that like just gets me amped up. We're time travelers. We're course correctors. We went to Africa a couple years ago, and we went to this village, and they were all another religion, and only one people group had come to them before, and they tried to stone them and had to leave. And then when we got there, they told us that. And they're like, we think that's going to be going really well this time. I'm like, great. Jeremy was there, and anyways, so we get there. Long or the short of it is, like 600 people in this village ended up converting to Christ over the weekend. But like nobody had been there before. So the timeline in that village has always been, it was always supposed to be this religion with our people for all. Hundreds of years they probably were there. It was just this religion. Us sticking here, it's just us. We're all family. We're villagers. We're this religion. We're this. We're this. It's just supposed to be this constant timeline. And all of a sudden, these time-traveling people came in to course correct. We showed up, and all of a sudden, they veered this way. And it was Christianity. And then the village starts growing. And that's the same thing in Thailand. When people start getting saved in these villages, they were supposed to be Hindu, or they're supposed to be wherever they're doing animist, and they're living this way. And then all of a sudden, someone brings the gospel, and it just course corrects. And it wasn't supposed to be there. And we just we're course changers. That is crazy to me. And in 100 years ago, or maybe 1,000 years ago, it wasn't even possible. I'm saying all this to amp you up to say, like, all you have to do is like follow the leading of God, and He's made it so easy to go to inaccessible places of any other time in history. It's not a coincidence that we live in the time we live in. For the longest time, when people were making maps, like we didn't have the whole world discovered yet. So when you would make a map, can you, Chad, if you'll put up that one of the pictures that I sent you. If you look at an old map, oh gosh, I didn't look at this in detail, sorry. Okay, if you look at a map, this is a map of Africa, and there's like this storm brewing over here, right? And then up in the corner, there's that sea monster. And then there's like a sea monster over here. Has anyone ever seen maps with sea monsters and dragons and things like that? You know what that means? They didn't go there. That's all it means. Like it was an empty part of the map, and they didn't want people to think, I don't know what this looks like in this area. We're just going to say it was too dangerous. We couldn't go there. There was a sea monster there. Sea monsters represent areas of undiscovered territory. And it's a kind of a nice visualization of what the world really looks like. Maybe not, there's maybe not an actual dragon, but like the areas of the world that the gospel hasn't been spread to are filled with these sea monsters of undiscovery. And that's why we're called to fill in the map. Also, on a personal note, we all have parts of our map that we have let God discover. And then there's parts of our hearts that, regret and fears and someone who hurt us and disappointments that we don't want God to kind of fill in. And there's little dragons there. And when we start letting God, like, okay, I know I haven't forgiven this person, God, but I want to forgive them. All of a sudden, that dragon's like, right? I have some dragons in different parts of my life where I haven't let God fill in that map. But God wants to fill up the entire map. There are parts in this world that have no clue that the gospel is even a thing. And we need to fill in the map. We don't need these just fill-ins. We are called to fill in the map. Pioneers. That's what we are. The definition of a pioneer is a person who is among the first to explore or settle a new country or area. Pioneers sounds cool, but it's sometimes lonely, and you don't have all the amenities that you want, and you don't have all the things that are comfortable, and it's unexplored, and it's a little daunting, and sometimes it can be scary. But it's also the ones that change history. You know, like, I'm sure, like, some of these guys that discovered different countries, discovered different areas, and, like, they weren't like, oh, I'm going to be in a history book someday. They were like, I've got mosquito bites all over me. I haven't ate in days. I've got diarrhea because of the water here. I figured out what parasites are. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't sound that beautiful. And then you look in the history book, like, they sailed and they discovered and put the flag there. But it was really difficult and hard. But then it changed. You think about discovering the Americas. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, of course, he's not a Christian, so I would say the biggest event in human history is Christ. And the second biggest event, which he believes is the biggest event, is him discovering the Americas because he bridged half of humanity with the other half. I'm sure these explorers didn't see it that way. You may not see it that way. You may have an assignment. Everybody wants to come to be a part of Far-Flung and sing at Emanate or sing at the call and do the big things. No, very few, and that's the ones we're looking for, are the ones that want to go serve for a few months or go on some sketchy trip somewhere that nobody's been before. They don't want to do that. But to me, those are the ones for the history book. There's so many different people that we could have in our ministry that are very talented, but would never go, to the Middle East with us. And we're looking for the ones that are like, I want to fill in the map. I want to go there and figure out what it's like where the mountains are, the valleys are, the rivers are. Let's go somewhere that requires a compass and not a map. That's my challenge. If you'll just stand up. If Jansen will come or someone. Oh, there he is. You're on all black. I can only see your red. You don't have to just go to an area of the world that is, there's not a lot of humanity. I'm not saying everybody needs to go to the Amazon rainforest. But there are some dragons and some sea monsters and some mega cities in the world that don't know Christ, that are uncharted. We need the glory of the glory of the Lord revealed. That's it. The knowledge of the glory changes everything. Just simply go where God calls you to go and proclaim truth. And all of a sudden, in an area that was in darkness, you start to realize, oh, there was a speaker here the whole time. Oh, there were cables here. There was a water bottle. There was all these things. They were already here. You can see it on people's faces. Like, you don't physically do something to change the situation, but you pray over them in hope and joy and all that rises up, and everything stayed the same, but they were just like, oh, God, you were here. It's like they were living in darkness and just literally everything was revealed to them. How many people in the world are living on a timeline that was supposed to be this the whole time? And they're waiting for you because for thousands of years, no one has been able to get to them or been willing to get to them. And now all of a sudden, we are given this opportunity to travel the world wherever we want. Every place is accessible now within 48 hours. And God's like, I've given you every tool you need to reach people and change the course, literally change history. We always say, I'm a world changer. It's almost become a cliche now because people are always like, I love this world changer, but they don't do anything with it. I'm serious about world changers. And world changer sounds daunting, but go change a village. Go change a school in your town. Change a youth group. That's changing the world. You can't just click your fingers like Thanos and change the world. It starts with the village. It starts with the smallest thing. Maybe your part in this is just change this one people group. And that may not sound like much, but think about this. For thousands of years, nobody did it. We've been to villages in India, and we were the first ones. We've been to villages in Thailand, we were the first ones. We've been to villages in Africa, we are the first ones. And we showed them honor, which is a whole nother sermon on itself, because we found out that showing honor unlocks everything. Dishonor closes every door, and honor opens every door. Heidi Baker told me that we asked her, how in the world have you changed like the whole north of Mozambique? And she said, it's having the ability to look past the masses and stopping for the one. That changed my life, because whenever I go anywhere now outside the country, and I think maybe I'm the only person that's going to stop and talk to this person. Maybe I'm the only Westerner that I'm going to see, and they associate Westerners with Christianity. And so even though I'm out souvenir shopping and I'm not here to minister, I'm the only one that can represent Christianity and show them love. I'm going to show them love. I'll stop. I'll talk, whatever you want. So all we wanted to do this morning is just have a sign of yes and surrender and say, God, whatever it is, I'm saying yes. Whatever people group, maybe it's several places, maybe it's an assignment to do this. Maybe your assignment is to evangelize wherever God calls. Or maybe it's, God, you want me to focus on this region, and I want to map out your glory and reveal it to an entire nation or village or city. I say yes this morning.